Hello, Teen Women of Valor. I'm so excited to be with you on week 25. I pray things have been going really well for you as you finish your study that you've been doing in your group. You finished up your fasting unit. So much has happened in the last 24 weeks. And I know that God is speaking to you, that you are discovering things about God in your life that you never knew before. But aren't you glad you're on a journey? You haven't arrived yet, I assume. Neither have I, but He is working in our lives, and I want to encourage you in that. Now, we're going to spend the next 8 weeks, and I just want to warn you that these next 8 weeks are going to challenge you, and they're going to stretch you. Now, don't turn off the video now. Just remember that God loves you so much that He's not going to leave you comfortable. He's not going to leave you where you are, but He does want to stretch you, and He has amazing things awaiting for you. He has planned out your life, and He just can't wait for you to listen to His voice and do what He's called you to do, because He's going to show you an amazing adventure. So are you ready for that ride? Please say yes to that ride. Now, the start of that is some self-discovery. So this week, week 25, you're going to begin to ponder your life and your testimony. All right? Don't be weirded out by the word testimony. You're going to begin to think about how God has worked in your life up to this point. All right? So as you look at week 25, you're going to find in the homework that there are some questions. All right? These questions are going to be for you to answer. Now, I don't want you to write out anything yet. I just want you to go question by question and answer them. Okay? In this, you're going to begin to answer questions about your life. Now, the goal in this is for people to know Jesus through our story. So the story of Jesus through our testimony, for them to know who He is and His mighty power and how He works through the way He's worked through our lives. Now, the great thing about this is God is working. Some ways we are very aware of, and some ways we are unaware of, but He is working, and He has been working since the day of your birth. He knew you when you were born. He knew you when you were 5. He knew you when you were 10, and He knows you now. And He knows all about you, and He loves you, and He has always had His hand on your life. And so what you're going to do is you're going to ask God to show you ways that He's been in your life. Now, the day of your birth, He already had a plan for your life. Now, you probably don't remember the day of your birth. If you do, you are quite incredible, because I don't think I know anybody who remembers actually the day of their birth. Now, your mom has probably told you about that day, and you can recall it, or maybe you can go back and look at pictures, but to actually remember in your head the day of your birth, probably not. And so I want you to think for a minute, when is the first memory that you have? Like, if you look back, when's the first time you remember something? For me, it was kindergarten. I remember the first day of kindergarten. I remember it very clearly. And I remember, this is really weird, but I remember that when we walked in, the teacher got me to stay and leave my mom, because she said we were going on a magic carpet ride, and then I could go over and sit on the carpet. So I went and sat on the carpet and waited for the magic carpet to take off. I'd seen the movie. And guess what? It didn't, but it got me away from my mom into the classroom, and we did a big imagine that you're riding on a carpet and see all the things fly by. And so I remember thinking, this isn't really happening. I wonder if the teacher really thinks we're flying. So anyway, that's my first memory. What's your first memory? You remember the first memory you had? Now, we're going to ask God this week in our prayer time, as you answer these questions, God, show me times in my life that you were there. Help me to remember things and points when you were there. If we would think of that as a timeline, we would start the beginning of the timeline with our birth, all right? The end of the timeline is our death, but somewhere in between is where we are now, okay? So let's say you were born at 0 and you live till you're 80, then your timeline moves back a little to the point of where you are now as a teen. So you mark your life there. So you have a small section of things that God's done up to this point. And I want you to spend time this week asking God, show me some ways you've been in my life. So you're gonna remember certain occasions, things that really stood out to you. I remember things in my life as a teenager where I remember one time in particular that I kind of had the reputation of being a Christian, like they knew that I went to church and what they knew about Christianity, that Jane was a Christian. But I remember a couple of instances in my teenage years where I just got sick of not being in the middle of the fun, and I showed up at some places that I shouldn't have been. And I remember, this is one thing I remember so well, is I went back to school. I had gone to a party and they were doing things at the party that I knew were wrong, but I don't know, I just guess I was just curious and I wanted to go see what was happening. And I went there. I remember on Monday, my friend Kristen saying, I heard you went to that place. And I'm so disappointed because I've always looked at you to see what I should and shouldn't do. And I guess you must think that's okay. And I had to apologize to her because I knew that I shouldn't have been there. I shouldn't have been in that situation and be seen there. So that's a significant time in my life. I remember it. I remember, God, and looking back, he was saying to me, Jane, you're going to have to choose to be all in or all out. I remember in early years, I remember my Sunday school teacher named Gladys, and I loved her, and she just showed me the love of God, and she showed me the Bible in a way that it's really the first time I guess I really knew God. Then I remember when I was in college, I remember again coming to that crossroad and thinking, am I going to follow Jesus or am I going to follow the world? And both looked pretty good. And I had to make the decision to do that. So many points in my life, and you'll have your own points in your life where you'll see God's hand. There will also be points where maybe it didn't have, that situation or that circumstance didn't have anything to do with God at all. But you look back and he shows you how his hand was with you. His hand of protection was there with you. And it says in Romans 8:28 that all things work together for good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. You love him. You have been chosen. You have been called. And so even those points in your life that you remember that maybe weren't good, maybe you didn't see God at the time, but you can look back and say, yep, he is using that for the good. I do see his handprint on that. So that's what you're going to do this week, is begin to look at your life and see how God has been there. There's a purpose in this. The reason we're doing this is ultimately we want to know God better. We want to be transformed, but we want other people to know God and be transformed. Now, you have friends around you that don't know Jesus, that they aren't following the ways of God, and they may not know those ways without you. You become the go-between between them knowing God and understanding God and being lost. When you're the go-between, then your story and who you are will help point them to Jesus, and that's our ultimate goal. That's why it's called telling his story through our testimony. We're pointing people to Jesus. Now, I want to tell you that as you walk through this testimony, God's going to show himself faithfully. He's going to begin to bring boldness to you to say, wow, look what God has done in my life. Look how faithful he is. Look how much he loves me. And as he does that for you, he's going to begin to build your faith. And you're going to begin to be bold and strong. And you're going to reach a point where you can't wait to tell people about others, or tell others about Jesus and what he's done in your life. All right, so I'm going to be praying for you this week. As you do your homework, answer the questions. You don't have to write out your testimony yet, just answer the questions. You'll come back week 26, share those answers with your group, and then week 26, you'll start writing your testimony. All right, so have a great week of pondering and discovering all that God has for you.